The Fabulous Alchemist. Harry had been thinking about the mysterious object hidden in the school for weeks now. Every time they tried to get information from a professor, they were met with nervous glances and suggestions to focus on their studies. Even Hermione, who usually had an answer for everything, seemed oddly evasive whenever Harry brought up the topic. It was becoming clear that whatever was being protected at Hogwarts was something the adults were deeply uncomfortable discussing. Which, in Harry's experience, usually meant it was either incredibly dangerous or incredibly important, or both. The breaking point came during a particularly awkward transfiguration lesson when Harry had asked Professor McGonagall about the thing everyone was whispering about, and she had literally dropped her wand, spent 5 minutes apologizing for her lack of cultural sensitivity, and then assigned the entire class an essay on the historical marginalization of magical creatures in academic literature. That evening, Harry decided they'd had enough. If the professors were going to be weird about it, they'd go straight to the source. They made their way through the castle's corridors, past the various portraits that seemed to whisper among themselves whenever Harry walked by, and up the spiral staircase to the headmaster's office. The password, thankfully, was still Lemon Drop, though Harry had noticed that Dumbledore had recently changed it to ethically sourced Lemon Drop, which seemed unnecessarily complicated. Harry climbed the stairs and found the door to Dumbledore's office slightly ajar. Through the gap, they could hear what sounded like, was that crying? No, 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 came Dumbledore's voice, thick with what sounded like genuine distress. I can't say that. That would be presumptuous. But I also can't not say anything, because that would be dismissive of their lived experience. But if I do say something, what if I say the wrong thing? What if I accidentally perpetuate harm? Harry pushed the door open wider and found Dumbledore sitting at his desk, surrounded by what appeared to be dozens of books with titles like Checking Your Privilege, The Wizard's Guide, and Decolonizing Magical Education, Moving Beyond Traditional Hierarchies. He was holding what looked like a stress ball shaped like a golden snitch, squeezing it rhythmically while staring at a piece of parchment with the intensity of someone trying to defuse a bomb. "Professor," Harry said, knocking on the door frame. Dumbledore jumped like he'd been caught doing something inappropriate, quickly shoving the books under his desk. "Harry." "Oh, dear." "Please, come in. Though I should warn you, I'm not sure I'm the right person to be having this conversation with you. Perhaps Professor McGonagall would be more culturally competent." Harry stepped into the office, noting that even the portraits seemed to be avoiding eye contact. "What conversation?" "The one you're undoubtedly here to have," Dumbledore said miserably, gesturing for Harry to sit down. "About the object that's being protected in the school." "Well, yes, I was hoping you could tell me about it." "And that's exactly the problem," Dumbledore explained, standing up and beginning to pace. "Because as a person in a position of authority, I have a responsibility to be transparent and honest with you. But I also have a responsibility to ensure that I'm not speaking from a place of privilege about experiences I don't understand. And furthermore, I need to consider whether my explanation might inadvertently reinforce harmful stereotypes or perpetuate systemic." "Professor," Harry interrupted gently, "I just want to know what it is." "Right. Yes. Of course." Dumbledore sat down heavily, pulling out what appeared to be a handwritten note covered in crossed-out lines and margin notes. "I've been preparing for this conversation, actually. I consulted with several diversity and inclusion experts, read extensively about not being terrible, and I think I have a framework for discussing this in a way that's both informative and respectful." He cleared his throat and began reading from the paper. "The object currently being protected within these walls is known as the gender-critical stone. It was created by a person whose identity and contributions have been historically marginalized, and I want to acknowledge from the outset that my perspective as a—" "Professor, you don't need to read from a script," Harry said. "Don't I?" Dumbledore looked up with genuine panic in his eyes. "Because I've been told that impromptu discussions about sensitive topics can lead to microaggressions, and I've already committed several just this week. Did you know that saying you people is problematic? Because I didn't, and I said it to Professor Flitwick during a staff meeting, and now I don't think he'll make eye contact with me." "Wanted to say to Professor Flitwick." I said you people are so good at Charm's work, and apparently that was apparently it was not the compliment I intended it to be. Dumbledore buried his face in his hands. I've been having these conversations with myself for weeks, Harry. Trying to figure out how to explain the gender-critical stone without saying something that might be harmful or offensive or just wrong. Maybe you could just tell me what it is. The gender-critical stone, Dumbledore said, consulting his notes again, was created by a man named Nicholas Flamel, though most called him Nicholas Flaming. Harry waited for more explanation, but Dumbledore seemed to have gone into some sort of trance, staring at his hands with what looked like guilt. And? Harry prompted. And he was, how do I put this delicately, he was what we might call a very flamboyant individual. Dumbledore's voice dropped to almost a whisper, as if he was afraid someone might overhear and accuse him of stereotyping. Flamboyant? Extremely so. Fabulously so, one might say. He lived for over 600 years, thanks to the elixir of life, and spent most of that time being absolutely, unapologetically himself in ways that made even the most progressive wizards of his era deeply uncomfortable. Harry was getting confused. What does that have to do with gender? Dumbledore sighed deeply, looking like he was about to deliver news of someone's death. Nicholas Flaming was, in the parlance of his time, what we would now understand as a very, how do the young people say it, extra gay man. He was so flamboyantly homosexual that he made Richard Simmons look subtle. Okay, Harry said slowly. But why is it called the gender-critical stone? Because, Dumbledore said, looking increasingly uncomfortable, Nicholas didn't just challenge traditional notions of sexuality. He challenged traditional notions of, well, everything. Gender presentation, magical practice, social hierarchies. He was what we might now call, and please understand, Harry, I'm trying to use the most respectful terminology possible here. Professor, you can just tell me. He was what modern scholars would classify as a gender-nonconforming magical revolutionary who used his immortality to systematically dismantle heteronormative power structures throughout medieval Europe. Harry blinked. That's very specific. The stone wasn't just about creating the elixir of life, Dumbledore continued, his voice getting more strained. It was about creating a magical artifact that would ensure people could live authentically for as long as they chose. The gender-critical part refers to Nicholas's belief that traditional gender roles were, quote, absolute rubbish that needed to be thrown in the bin immediately. So it's actually about gender? Harry asked, feeling a surge of excitement. Well, yes, but also no, but also yes in a different way, Dumbledore said miserably. You see, Nicholas believed that true immortality could only be achieved by living as your authentic self, free from societal expectations and limitations. The stone doesn't just grant eternal life, it grants the power to live that life on your own terms. That's amazing, Harry said. Is it, though? Dumbledore asked anxiously. Because I have to tell you, Harry, as a straight, white, cisgender male in a position of authority, I'm deeply aware that I may not be the appropriate person to be explaining this to you. I've been reading extensively about my privilege, and I'm concerned that my perspective might be inherently biased. Professor. I've been taking workshops, Dumbledore continued desperately. Online seminars about the decolonizing educational leadership and trauma-informed approaches to magical education. I've learned that my very presence in this role might be perpetuating systemic inequalities, and I'm not sure how to address that without making it worse. The portraits on the walls were now openly staring at this display, and Harry was pretty sure they heard one of them mutter something about the good old days when headmasters just told students things. Professor Dumbledore, Harry said carefully, I appreciate that you're trying to be respectful, but I really just want to understand what this stone does. Right. Yes. The stone. Dumbledore took a deep breath and seemed to pull himself together slightly. It's about authenticity, Harry. Nicholas Flaming created it because he believed that the greatest magic in the world was the magic of being completely, unapologetically yourself. The stone doesn't just grant immortality, it grants the power to live that immortality as your truest self. And that's why it's called the gender-critical stone. Well, gender-critical in the sense that Nicholas was critical of traditional gender roles, Not in the sense that he was, oh dear, I hope that's not how it sounds. I wouldn't want anyone to think that Nicholas was opposed to gender identity or expression. Quite the opposite, actually. He was very much in favor of people expressing their gender in whatever way felt authentic to them. Harry was starting to understand. So he was like a really early activist. The earliest, one might say. And the most fabulous. Dumbledore's eyes had a brief twinkle before the guilt returned. Though I should note that my characterization of his fabulousness is based on historical accounts, and I want to be clear that I'm not trying to stereotype or reduce his contributions to his sexual orientation or gender presentation. Professor, I think it's okay to say that someone was fabulous. Is it, though? Because I've been told that assuming someone's personality traits based on their identity is problematic, and I don't want to perpetuate harmful stereotypes about gay men being flamboyant, even if Nicholas specifically was incredibly flamboyant. Harry was beginning to understand why the other professors had been so evasive. So this Nicholas flaming person created a stone that helps people live authentically. Exactly. Though I should add that his partner, Perenelle, was equally involved in the creation process, and I don't want to erase her contributions just because Nicholas was more visible in his activism. His partner was supportive. Oh, tremendously so. She was actually the one who suggested adding the gender-critical element to the stone's properties. She was what we might now call a feminist ally, though again, I want to be careful not to impose modern terminology on historical figures. Harry felt a warm feeling spreading through their chest. So there's actually a magical artifact that was created by people who believed in being yourself. Completely and utterly yourself, Dumbledore confirmed. Nicholas used to say that the only real magic was the magic of authenticity. Everything else was just tricks. And that's what Voldemort is trying to steal. At the mention of Voldemort's name, Dumbledore's face went pale again. Yes, and Harry, I have to tell you, as someone who has been doing a lot of reading about the historical context of oppression and resistance, I'm deeply concerned about what Voldemort's interest in this particular artifact might represent. What do you mean? I mean that Voldemort represents, well, he represents everything that Nicholas and Perenelle fought against. Traditional power structures, rigid hierarchies, the idea that there's only one correct way to be a person. Dumbledore's voice was getting stronger now, as if talking about the actual problem was easier than trying to navigate the social dynamics of explaining it. So him wanting the stone is. It's about more than just immortality, Harry. It's about taking something that was created to celebrate diversity and authenticity and using it to enforce conformity and oppression. It's about. Dumbledore paused, consulting his notes again. It's about the appropriation of marginalized voices and the weaponization of their contributions against the very communities they sought to protect. Harry stared at him. Did you memorize that? I've been practicing, Dumbledore admitted. I wanted to make sure I could explain the situation without accidentally being offensive. And you think Voldemort doesn't know about the stone's actual purpose? Oh, he knows, Dumbledore said grimly. That's what makes it so much worse. He's not just trying to steal a powerful magical artifact, he's trying to steal a symbol of resistance and turn it into a tool of oppression. Harry felt something cold settle in their stomach. So this is personal. Very personal, Dumbledore agreed. And Harry, I have to tell you, I'm not sure I'm equipped to guide you through this. I've been reading about my role as an ally, and I'm concerned that my instinct to protect you might actually be a manifestation of paternalistic attitudes that. Professor, Harry interrupted, I think you're overthinking this. Am I? Because I've been told that dismissing someone's concerns about social justice is a form of gaslighting, and I don't want to invalidate your experience by suggesting that. Professor Dumbledore, Harry said firmly, I think you're a good person who's trying really hard to do the right thing, and that's enough. Dumbledore looked up at them with something that might have been hope. Do you really think so? I do. And I think Nicholas Flaming would probably appreciate that you're trying to honor his legacy by being respectful about it. That's very kind of you to say, Harry. Dumbledore's eyes were definitely twinkling now. Though I should note that I've been reading about the concept of emotional labor, and I don't want to put the burden of reassuring me on you when you're the one who came here seeking information." "It's okay," Harry said with a small smile. "I think we're helping each other." "I suppose we are," Dumbledore said, looking slightly less miserable. "Now, is there anything else you'd like to know about the gender-critical stone?" "Just one thing," Harry said. "If it's about authenticity and being yourself, and Voldemort represents everything opposite to that." "Yes?" "Then I think I understand why he wants it. And I think I understand why he can't be allowed to have it." "I believe you're absolutely right," Dumbledore said solemnly. "Though I should warn you, Harry, if you're planning to do anything about this situation, you should know that Nicholas had a very particular sense of style when it came to magical protections." "What do you mean?" "Let's just say that the man never met a magical challenge he couldn't bedazzle. The protections around the stone are, well, they're very much in keeping with his personality." Harry grinned. "I think I can handle fabulous." "I rather thought you might," Dumbledore said, his eyes twinkling properly for the first time in the conversation. "Just remember, Harry, authenticity is the most powerful magic of all." As Harry left the office, they couldn't help but think that maybe, just maybe, they were starting to understand what this was really all about. And if Voldemort thought he could steal something that represented everything Harry was fighting to become, well, he was about to learn just how powerful authentic magic could be.